Do you remember the childhood way of marking time? Counting sleeps. Anybody still do that? No, you take an event on the calendar and you count how many sleeps it will take for you to get there. You don't count naps. That just kind of messes up the count. So if we did that today, we would say that we are 7 sleeps from the triumphal entry. And we are 12 sleeps away from Christ's death. Of course, that's if we were to base everything on the calendar that we have, on the calendar that hangs on the wall. However, for John, in our reading today, we are 1 sleep away from the triumphal entry, and we are 6 sleeps away from Christ's death. Our gospel reading stands right before Jesus embarks on that road to the cross. And once he dons the donkey and he rides into Jerusalem, the course is set, and there's really no turning back, right? So death is looming near. It's kind of the overarching shadow which hangs over everything, and John wants us to know it. So while our reading centers on a dinner party, on this festive occasion with hilarity and laughter and food, it actually occurs against the backdrop of Christ's death. Mary anoints Jesus with oil, but she anoints him in a manner to which Jesus says is actually for his burial. Yes, it's an act of devotion. Yes, it's an act of extravagant love, but Mary reaches out and expresses her gratitude and thankfulness to Jesus, but in reaching out to him, she grasps the one who brings life through his death. And as we approach that time, pretty soon, where we will journey with Jesus into Jerusalem, and through the Last Supper, and through his betrayal, and to his subsequent death on the cross, the question for us is, how will we be like Mary? How will we reach out to him? How can we bestow our lavish devotion on the one who procures our lives through his death? If you wish to follow along, I invite you to pick up your Bibles and turn to John chapter 12. Page number is in your bulletin. In our hymn book, we have this wonderful hymn called "We Hold the Death of Our Lord." We hold the death of the Lord. And one of the lines of the hymn in the first verse reads, "Dead became living, life from your giving." And in some sense, that sums up quite well, I think, what we see in our reading today. John is adamant that we understand that Jesus is going to die, that we remember that fact, and that we see everything that happens after that in light of that fact, that his death is just around the corner. So our reading begins 6 days before the Passover. The countdown has begun. 1 week from now, Jesus will be in the tomb, John is saying. Mary pours oil, pure nard, on Jesus' own feet, not on his head, which is a symbol of kingship and elevation, but on his feet. On his feet that will take him to death. And when Judas objects, Jesus indicates that Mary mystically seems to understand that his burial is soon. That this expression of devotion points to that. Jesus goes on to say, "You will always have the poor, but you will not always have me." And now that statement, it isn't actually about the poor. It's not about the fiscal responsibility. It's not about our ministry to those less fortunate. It's again highlighting the fact that Jesus is the one to be crucified. That he's saying to Mary, he's saying to Judas, he's saying to the disciples, that physically in this body you will not always see me. And that's coming soon. He is declaring to them that his lordship involves his death. And the fact that this occurs at a dinner party, in celebration of the renewed life that Lazarus has received, because he's sitting at the table, shows that dead become living, life from his giving. So imagine the scene. It's really an evocative scene which evokes all our senses. And so if you are an imaginative type, this is very much Ignatian spirituality where we try to imagine ourselves in the scene. But kind of as a movie, just kind of run through it. Here we have a dinner party, the sights and the sounds and the smells. There's at least 16 people gathered, probably more. It's done in celebration of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, which has just occurred. This in John chapter 11 has just occurred. So this is a scene of celebration. It's a scene of joy. It's a scene of life and wonderment. People are amazed at what has happened. How powerful this Jesus guy is. This is amazing. Lazarus is sitting there. He was dead and now he's alive. Martha is serving, probably better hosting this party. Food is everywhere. People are laughing and eating. Jesus and the disciples and Lazarus, they are reclining at the table. This is a celebration of life, and it's a celebration of thanksgiving for what Jesus has done for Lazarus and the family. And at one point in the dinner party, Mary gets up. She grabs a jar of pure nard, which is 11 ounces worth, she grabs, about 3/4 of a cup. And silently, she pours it out over Jesus' feet. And the smell of this nard, this very pungent perfume, it would just fill the room. And one by one, everybody would stop their conversations and turn and look to see what Mary's doing. Imagine that. Now, perfume is often used to make us more attractive, right? We put it on ourselves to make us seem more desirable, more pleasant, more palatable, let's say. But cologne and perfume is something that we don for ourselves. We generally don't go around dumping it on other people or spraying other people. When I was young, my father was given a Christmas gift of a bottle of Old Spice. You remember Old Spice? Anybody still have Old Spice? You do? Okay. So he got this gift, and one day my two sisters, who were probably around 3 or 4, or maybe 4 or 5 at this point, they learned that their favorite babysitter was coming over, and they really wanted to impress him. And so they went up to the bathroom and they wanted to make themselves pretty for the sitter. So they took my dad's bottle of Old Spice and they began to spray the entire bottle over themselves. I'm not making this up. This is what they actually did. And it stunk up the whole house for days. Right? But that's what we do with cologne and perfume. We beautify ourselves. We try to make ourselves more appealing. Mary, however, isn't focused on herself. She is entirely focused on Jesus. This isn't about making herself more appealing. This isn't about heightening her status. This is about expressing how glorious, how majestic Jesus is for her. It's not an act of beautification. It's an act of devotion. Pouring out her heart before her Lord. Now, we don't know where this oil came from, right? It might have been purchased for Lazarus' own burial, maybe. It could have been a family heirloom passed down from generation to generation. But what we do know is that this is spikenard, and this is the costliest of perfumes. Right? When Judas looks at this scene and he objects and says, hey, you could have sold this for 300 denarii. You could have put a picture of this on Jerusalem Kijiji, and we could have got 300 denarii for this. 300 denarii, that's roughly around $20,000 in today's currency. Right? This is not the cheapest thing that you find at the dollar store. This is expensive. This is extravagant. This is lavish stuff. And Mary dumps it out. She dumps it out as an extravagant act of love and devotion. And then she takes it one step further. She unbinds her hair. And that would have been shameful, and that would have been a humiliating thing to do. Because women of the day, it was only the women with loose morals that would have loosened hair. But she kneels down and she begins to dry Jesus' feet with her hair. There is a sense that she is casting any sense of appropriateness or reserve out the window. Mary's heart is simply bursting with love so much that she must show Jesus her devotion to him. She must, in some sense, communicate, this is how much I love you. This is how much I am thankful for you, Jesus. So Mary takes the most extravagant thing she has, and she does the most extravagant actions, all to express her love and her devotion. And as she kneels down at his feet, and her hair sopping up the oil, I just have this picture of her clinging to the one who will be crucified, wrapping her arms around his feet. Somewhere deep within this action, there is this recognition that the life of Lazarus and that everything that she herself has received from Jesus comes at the cost of his own life. She knows more than anybody else in this scene that her devotion is to one who will die. So how can you echo Mary's devotion? Now, you don't have to pour out your Chanel No. 5 or your Old Spice bottle. Yet flowing out of Lazarus' tomb and into this party, there is this recognition of the greatness of Jesus. Mary probably has flashing in her mind all the things that Jesus has done for her or for her family. What has Jesus done for you? If you were sitting at this party, thinking about how thankful you were to Jesus, what would come to mind? At the tomb of Lazarus, Jesus says, I am the resurrection and I am the life. Do you believe this? Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, they don't just believe it, they've experienced it. Where have you experienced life from Jesus? Where has Jesus given you strength where you thought you had none? Hope where you were tempted to despair? When has Jesus led you through dark corners of life out of hardships or struggle? If you were Mary, what is the story that you would pour out upon the feet of Jesus in thankfulness for everything that he has done for you? But more to the point, how will you recognize that all of the answers to those questions, all of your reflections about what Jesus has done for you, that they come from the cross? The life that you have been gifted with, even just physically here, the love of God that we receive, the endless assurance of forgiveness, all of it comes because the feet of Jesus walked to the cross. Again, the hymn, he chose to give of himself, became our bread, broken that we might live, love beyond love, pain beyond pain. We hold the death of the Lord deep in our hearts. When we affirm that Jesus died on the cross, we aren't merely making a historical declaration. More than describing an event that took place 2,000 years ago, recognizing the death of Christ points to the all-encompassing love of Jesus. The sorrow of Jesus in walking to that cross is the love of Jesus that stands with us in our sorrow. The pain that he felt as the nails pierced his flesh is Christ's very embracing of our own pain. We have a Messiah whose love is found precisely in joining us in whatever situation we find ourselves. There is no hurt that he cannot heal. There is no ache in our lives that he cannot fill. There is no sense of loneliness that he will not combat. Because the Messiah does not stand far removed from us. He enters the grave for us. He enters the grave for you. To hold the death of the Lord is to recognize what he took on in order to breathe new life for you. To recognize all of that is to offer him our thanks in the most magnificent, in the most extravagant, in the richest of manners that we can possibly think of. And it might be something different for everybody, right? For Mary, it was a bottle of pure nard. For the widow, it was a penny. What is important isn't the fiscal amount of the offering, or even the tangible expression of it. If we want to echo Mary, what matters is having a heart of devotion, a heart and a spirit that just bursts in gratitude for the death of Jesus on the cross, and the life that he bestows there. A heart that looks toward Jesus and is overcome in gratitude and love. A heart that looks to Jesus and feels compelled to reach out to him in a deeper way. That's what Mary has. And Mary will not be deterred. Nor will Jesus allow her to be. When Judas gets in the way. When Judas, so consumed with building up his own kingdom and his own voice, when he rebukes what Mary does, Jesus rebukes him. And he receives her. And so for you, do not be deterred. Do not be wavered from offering your acts of devotion to Jesus. Do not be denied the act of pouring out your heart before the one who journeys to the cross for you. Pour out your devotion and grasp the feet of the one who died for you, because it is in grasping the crucified Lord that we find that we are actually grasping the resurrected one, and we receive our own resurrection out of that. Amen.